Hi, everyone. Welcome to the first ever live session of Coffee with Megha. I'm sorry I had a little bit of a hiccup, but here I am. Welcome. I hope you all have your coffees ready for your first ever session. So, if we haven't met, my name is Megha Mathur, and I'm a mental health professional. And I welcome you to my first ever broadcast. So, let me first start by talking about how and who I am. I am a mental health professional and I have been in this profession for the past 10 years, and I specialize in anxiety and depression disorders. I started this channel as a medium for a lot of you people out there who have a very difficult time connecting and asking questions on mental health. I regularly post a lot of mental health. I answer a lot of mental health questions on Quora, and I have over 400,000 views. So I'm pretty proud about that fact. And so I thought this would be a great way for me to start answering some questions where mental health is a taboo and it's very difficult for a lot of people to talk about. So I have a few questions that I answered on Quora that I would share on my first ever podcast because because I'm just starting out. I didn't get a lot of questions, but I answered a few on Quora that I thought would be helpful for a lot of people who have joined me live today. So let's begin. Let's start with our coffees first. So the first question that I get asked a lot, is about how therapists interact with their clients. What are some of the smallest details that therapists and psychologists notice about their clients? That's a very, very interesting question that I was asked very recently. The first impression that a lot of clients get is that the therapists are judging them. We're not. When you're entering our room for the first time, we're kind of looking for cues that kind of tell us what your baselines are. So, for example, when I meet a client for the first time, I'm actually looking for baseline body languages. So, for example, if you come in with a strong handshake, I kind of understand that you are wanting to go ahead and have a conversation that is going to be beneficial to you, and you're not scared to talk about your feelings. Some of the other things that I look for is when your arms get crossed in front of you. And this is an indication that maybe, something I've said has caused you to feel a certain way, or maybe it is something that I need to focus back on because the defenses in that person have gone up. I also look for, some odd indications in an individual, and these include maybe swallowing because they're not too sure of that line of questioning in a session. And it kind of helps to get those baselines in. Swallowing, when you're swallowing more than necessary, it's kind of an indication that you are not comfortable and maybe the therapist has crossed a line, or it is something that is a little touchy for someone. Some of the other small details we obviously notice are how open are you to discussing your feelings? How much time do the therapists have to take to get an understanding of how much you're going to open up sooner? So these are some of the smallest details that therapists and psychologists notice about their clients. So I hope this helped you answer some question. The first question that I get asked a lot is the details of people that are that genuinely are scared when they go into a therapist office. Please don't be scared. Be yourself, because it only helps the therapist to understand your baselines, and it is not a therapist's job to judge you. We are only here to help you. All right, so let's move on to the next question. Is it normal for me to feel depressed in college? Yes, it is absolutely normal for a lot of students who enter college right after high school. And this is what I have seen in my profession. What happens is the children are not used to having such big loads of work. Initially, they are they're told it's okay, they can easily just finish off things, but in university the load of work increases. It's no longer easy for them to just pass by. The projects increase, the expectations of what you're supposed to do increases. So this puts a lot of pressure on a lot of kids, and it starts to take a toll. So it's absolutely normal that a child that's going from high school will suddenly start to feel depressed in university because they're not living up to those expectations that they had when they were in high school. For example, if this kid was really, really good and in high school and got really great grades, in university it could have a different impact. They could suddenly feel that their grades are not at par of what they're used to be. So it's parents' job, or even the university's psychologists or counselors, to kind of notice those slight subtle changes in a child. Let me tell you a story with this question. One of my cousins went into university a couple of years back, and she took on 5 subjects in the first semester that she joined her university. And it was hard because she was used to being a big, great student. And it didn't gel with her that she could not do 5 subjects because she's used to doing a lot more. And in the end, it took a toll on her mental health because in her mind, she was letting somebody down. Maybe she thought she was letting her family down, or maybe she thought she was letting herself down. So we all had to sit her down and say, no, it's okay. It's easier for you to take a smaller load in university and do well in those rather than take on a bigger load and feel like you're not doing well in anything. Now, some of the other reasons that I've seen as a therapist and a counselor that causes someone to feel depressed in college is your social life. In university, there's always a lot of peer pressure. I mean, people are always, trying to fit in, and that causes a lot of stress, because if you're not able to fit in, then it takes a toll on the child's mental health. And I always used to tell my college going students that you will always find people who are at your mental bandwidth. You will always find someone who is going to resonate with you. You don't have to go out and look for those people. You need to find them, through your own circles, through your clubs. You don't have to fall under the trap of peer pressure. Just continue and get yourself organized at university, join clubs that interest you, and you'll automatically start to build your friendships. So I always ask, and I always tell my students this in colleges, just be yourself, and you will feel happier when you do things at your own pace, when you do things at your own, on your own, again, pace, and feel good about it. So it is normal for students to feel depressed in college. And my recommendation is that if you see the signs of depression, then do speak to your school psychologists or your counselors and get yourself, talk those feelings out. It only helps. And it gives you a better understanding of what's going on. All right, let's see what the next question is. As a therapist, what are some of the things that your clients do that they think you don't notice? That's a very, very good question. As a therapist, what are some of the things that your clients do that they think you don't notice? Some of the things that I've thought that my clients think I haven't noticed are their body language. What was it that I said that caused them to feel something, I immediately notice it. If I see a change in tone of their voice, it helps me understand that maybe I touched a nerve or I should have not asked that question. So some of those things are pretty similar to what a therapist and a psychologist notice when you first meet them, because we establish those baselines. We establish them and say, okay, um, you crossed your hands in the first session, your defenses went up. So why did they go up? And in consecutive sessions, if your defenses are going up, then it helps me understand, okay, why did your defense go up? What was it that caused your defenses to go up? And those are some of the subtle things that I start to notice. One other thing that I do see in a lot of clients is when they suddenly take a lot of interest in their therapist's personal life. Nothing wrong with it, but it starts to become like a mode of deflection. So if it becomes like a mode of deflection, and instead of focusing on themselves, I see that they're focusing on me more, then I need to go back and understand what was it that caused them to cause a deflection. So I hope this answered your question, and I will move on to what the next question is. Do you find clients who are fearful of letting people get too close to them outside of therapy have a difficult time connecting and opening to you? How do you help them feel safe enough to let you in? Now, this is a very good question. This is one of the first questions that a lot of clients who come into therapy ask is, what if I'm not open to, start talking about my feelings? What would you do? We give you space. We give you time. That's the best thing that we can do as therapists, is to give our clients time. There were a lot of sessions when I was working as a counselor where the sessions were quiet. And it was because they were not comfortable opening up yet. So you give them space. And it's not like it's the quietness causes us to feel, weird. No, it doesn't. Well, we don't feel weird if the session goes quiet. If we know that the client is building trust. So this is a way for, the therapist to understand that maybe talking about certain feelings is difficult. So we chit chat about other things. What is it that, causes them to feel happy, for example? So we would steer away from topics which are causing them stress and focus on topics that make them happy or they're willing to talk about. And this builds trust. Now, one of the key things I know to make a person feel safe in counseling is to have patience. Now, if you're someone who's looking to get into counseling and you're looking to find a therapist, then I do suggest that when you go in for your first session, see how patient your therapist is, or see how patient your counselor is. It makes a big, big difference. Why is it? It's because if they're trying to rush you through your feelings, then you're not going to process whatever it is that you felt. It's not going to help you process those emotions, because that is really important for you to do in a therapy session. You need to have a therapist who is patient for you. I remember a few times in my sessions, I would try and ask a question from a client. And I would try to get an answer from a client. And they would say, I'm not ready to talk about it. And I would say, fine, that's fine. We can focus on it whenever you're ready. And we would do this for a few times, just talk about them, talk about other things. And eventually, when they felt that the trust between them and the therapist was good enough, they opened up about that specific question. So being patient in your sessions is absolutely key. So if you have a therapist who's rushing you along and trying to say, come on, chop, let's get you going and let's try to get you to answer questions and process your feelings because we only have these number of sessions, then it would probably be time for you to, find another therapist. So I hope this kind of answered your question of, what is it that therapists do? A good therapist will always find a way to connect with the client. And it's necessary for them to find that way. Even if it means maybe deferring a few sessions where we're not talking about that specific topic. Maybe we're talking about everything else that has helped them. But whatever it is, we need to give our clients patience and time. How do I know I am depressed? And how do I tell my parents? This is a very good question. So, right off the bat, I'm going to tell you that the only way you're going to be told that you're depressed if your therapist does something called as a depression inventory to kind of understand what kind of depression you're having. Are you mild, moderate, or a severe case of depression? So, when I am talking about right now how you would feel or what you're going to feel when you're depressed, it's coming mostly from my experience. So, I don't want you to take it personally and think that, hey, maybe I am depressed. But if you want to know some of the symptoms, then the first one you're going to feel is things that you enjoyed before, you stop enjoying them. That is absolutely the number one symptom, or I would say sign, that a person with depression feels. It is when you stop enjoying the things you do. And that is important, because if you're not enjoying the things you are doing, then what exactly are you enjoying in life? So we always have to have that as your first sign and symptom, is when you stop enjoying things you like. One of the other things that I notice when a person is depressed is when they tend to sleep a little bit more, when they're sleeping more hours than necessary. So for we as humans need 8 hours, but a person who is depressed would probably be sleeping close to 10 to 15 hours. So that is an indication that they're going through something that is bothering them. One of the other things I've noticed for a person who is depressed is they don't take care of themselves, which means you would see that it becomes a big effort for them to get up and get ready and go to work or do whatever it is. Um, it takes away, again, it goes back to my first point where, the joy of doing anything is taken away. So the joy of getting ready and doing other things is also taken away. Um, and it causes a little bit of stress and issue on their in their lives, because they're not taking care of them, and that kind of becomes a repetitive thought where, when you're not taking care of yourself, you feel sad, which kind of causes you to feel depression, and the symptoms keep going in a circle again and again and again. And that is one of the biggest symptoms as well. As from my own experience, I can also say that when you're constantly having negative thoughts is when you're also in a rut of having symptoms of depression. Because one negative thought feeds another one, and that feeds into another one. So, for example, if somebody is depressed and they're thinking, I'm not good enough, then the next negative thought is, you know what? My self esteem is not good. And then following that, why should I even do anything when I'm not good at anything? So you see how that happens? It becomes very, very hard to come out of these thoughts because they feed off each other. So these are some of the things I can tell you when somebody's feeling depressed. And again, the only way to know that you're depressed is to get a depression inventory done, which is always done by either your psychologist or your psychiatrist. Now, the question, your next part of the question is, how do I tell my parents? Just tell them, because your parents love you and they want to take care of you. So just tell your parents. Just tell them that, you know what? I don't think I'm feeling good. I need to go see somebody. I need to figure out what's happening because I don't feel like myself. Being honest about it and communicating it directly with your parents is the best way to go. It's better not to hide your feelings, because if you are, say, for example, moderately depressed and you're trying to hide you're depressed, there's a high chance that you might then become on the severe scale because you weren't able to get the necessary help. So be honest, be open, communicate that with your parents, and let them know that, you know what, I need help. And remember, parents are some people, parents love you. So, they will try their best to make sure that you get the right help. I hope this helped answer your question on how do you know if you're depressed. And, I hope that you find the right help and that you're able to tell your parents. One of the next question I have is, after seeing a client for 2 years, would it be weird or catch you off guard if they asked you what you've learned about them or how your impression of them has changed from the first time they met you versus now? Absolutely not. I actually appreciate the fact that we have an open discussion about this. When I counsel my clients, I think we do like a recheck every few weeks. I would say 4 or 5 weeks, and I ask them to give me feedback because I want to know if that I've addressed all of their concerns, and if there's anything that they want to for me to focus on. It's very important that we kind of have this open communication form. It's never weird to get feedback both ways. Sometimes the clients are curious to know what the therapist thinks if they've made progress, um, and that comes from the fact that they're looking to see if the therapist is impressed with their progression. And I want to make clear that we're not getting impressed by anyone. We're just making sure that you are doing well. So, in my time when I am counseling, I always have this session where after 4 or 5 weeks, I'm asking the client and telling them, hey, you know what? I've seen you do a lot of progress in this part. And I think we might need to focus a little bit on this other session, on this other section of your life. Are you open to it? And they would say yes, they would say no, because maybe they feel they needed to work on something else previously. So it all depends on the client and the therapist of what the relationship they have with each other, how comfortable they are with receiving feedback. I used to like getting feedback on from clients about how if there's a way I can improve my sessions for them. Is there a way I can make them feel good, or is there something that I need to focus back on? Maybe I rushed through something and they hadn't processed it completely. So it's important to have this open concept of communication. So it's never weird for you to have this conversation with a therapist. Most therapists are open about it. But don't ask them too many times, because otherwise they're going to think that, again, back to my point that I was making a few moments ago, that they would think that you're trying to deflect from a situation. In my sessions, when I would meet the client for the first time, I would set this expectation that every 4 or 5 weeks we're going to have a review session. And this review session is going to be absolutely necessary to understand where we are at. And I don't want to have this discrepancy where I feel I've done something, whereas the client has felt they haven't fully, processed it or gone through those specific emotions. So if you are in therapy and you are looking to ask this question to your therapist, then by all means go ahead, because open communication between your therapist and yourself is absolutely necessary. So go ahead. I don't think most therapists are going to mind you asking this question. And if there's somebody like me, we're more open to having a chat rather than making this a very, very professional relationship. Why does therapy take so much time, like months or even years? Why can't a therapist just tell clients like me what needs to be done and get it over with? It's easier for both the parties to live their lives. That's a very interesting question. Um, to me, it seems like this person wants to rush through therapy. But the reason it takes so much time is because not everyone is ready to process their emotions at any given time. A therapist has to sit, do their own, recon missions or recon before the clients come into sessions, and kind of figure out, this is what I noticed in my previous session, and I want to focus on this more, even though it means we might be stepping back a few sessions or maybe in our progress, but it is imperative that the client feels that we did our jobs right and made them focus back on things that were necessary for them. Because if we don't focus back on those things, then there's going to be no progress. And if there's no progress, then there's no point of therapy. So that's why we don't rush in our therapy. We take our time. Typically, a lot of sessions probably go around 12 to 13 regular weekly sessions, and then they go monthly or bi-weekly, and then they go on to monthly sessions, and then 6 monthly. It's only because we're trying to figure out if there's been a change in the patient and the client's behavior. So that's why we don't rush our clients, because we need our clients to process every single thing. And we give homework to the clients to see if they do those exercises at home and figure out if they were able to do it. Because if they were able to do it, it means they were ready to engage their emotions head on. And if they weren't ready to do it, then that gives an indication to the therapist that we do need to focus on this particular issue a little bit more. So that's why it's the key to give time and patience to our clients and make sure that, again, we have this open communication that, you know what, I feel we've done enough on this part of my life. I want to focus on this part of my life. So can we do it? So that's why it's necessary to have this, there's no time frame. If we have a time frame, then it doesn't work. That's why you'll see a lot of clients in therapy for a lot of time, because they're processing it very slowly. And especially with clients who go through trauma or abuse, that type of therapy is much, much longer, because those emotions are very, very deep. Well, coffee break. As a child, tears were loudly and enthusiastically mocked. If I were to cry in therapy, what do I do about ugly crying? The snot, the sounds, the crumbling tissue remains. What will my therapist do or think about the nastiness that comes with tears? And that's a very good question. If you were to go to any therapist's office, you would see that there are going to be a lot of box of tissues. And that is because we understand that going through your emotions is very, very hard. And especially if they're buried deep down. So I consider my kind of feelings as being like an onion. When you peel off an onion, there are layers and layers and layers till you find the core. And that's what happens with a lot of people, is when we start to peel off those layers of overlapping feelings and we get down to the deeper, darker, negative emotions, it takes a toll on the client. So we're not there to judge the client. Those tears to us mean that they're processing their emotions, they're processing their feelings, and it doesn't matter to us. We don't judge anybody. Again, back to the question that I had a few moments ago, is as therapists and psychologists and mental health professionals, we're not here to judge someone. If you cry in a session, it's just an indication that maybe you're processing something. It could mean two things. Either you're ready to process what you went through, or you're crying because you're not ready to process what you went through. There are two different avenues to a person who's crying. And this is because crying denotes many different things. A person who cries who's crying because they understood what their feeling was, they understood what their emotions was, and they were able to answer something specific in their mind, is crying because it's like a moment for them to, let go and feel happy or feel relieved. Yeah, feel more relieved. And a person who's crying because all of a sudden they feel that they are put on the spot and they're not ready, is crying because it's a mechanism, a defense mechanism for them to say, you know what, back off, I'm not ready to process this yet. And that's when the therapist has to make sure that we're understanding this correctly and gauging it. So if you feel that it is something that you need to let go of your feelings and emotions, then by all means take those tears out, because it's a way for your body to feel or anything that it has been holding on to. Either it is a relief or it's a defense. Whatever it is, it's a way for your body to find that relief. Is expecting an apology akin to forgiveness? How do you accept an apology if you are not entirely if you're not entirely over of what the person did? Now, that's a very, very, very good question. Forgiveness and apology and accepting an apology are two very different things. in my mind, or this would probably come from my own professional opinion, and maybe not all of the therapists and mental health professionals would agree with this, but when I see forgiveness, it's basically for the actions that happened. And it is when I've said, all right, I accept that this happened to me and I'm ready to move on. Whereas an apology that comes from somebody else means that they're truly sorry about their actions and words. And if this action gets repeated again, then forgiveness doesn't come that easily. They're two very different things. An apology means that you're telling this person in front of you that you're not going to do this again, whereas forgiveness is on the person who got affected. It's their prerogative to forgive you, even though the person has apologized. But that's the main difference. Apology is given by the person who did something. Forgiveness is achieved when the person who was affected the most is able to say, fine, we can move on from this. And how do you accept an apology if you are entirely over, if you're not entirely over what the person did? If you're not entirely over of what the person did, then it's very hard to forgive someone. It becomes very difficult to process what happened to you. And that's when you need a therapist's help. And probably having both the parties present there is necessary to kind of mediate that process. Um, you can accept the apology. Again, it depends entirely on the person. So whatever you need help with, I would suggest that you get a therapist and see if they can mediate the apology from the person and maybe understand if you can forgive someone. So try and see if that will help you. But you cannot accept an apology from someone if you're not going to be able to forgive them. Then it becomes like an empty meaning, empty words. They don't mean anything. So it's very hard, and I need for you to understand that there are two very different concepts. An apology is when the person who did something says sorry, versus forgiveness comes from the person who was affected. Now, how common is it for patients to feel a constant up and down of emotions towards the therapist and an inconsistent desire and commitment to continue therapy? What strategies could the patient use to reestablish their desire and commitment to therapy? Now, this is a very good question. Um, in sessions, you're going to have your clients go up and down, and it is the therapist's job to figure out what is causing these barrage of emotions coming in, where the client is happy at one time and then they're not happy the next time. It is their job to figure out if they've crossed a certain line and they need to go back a few steps and figure out maybe they were not ready to move forward from that particular point to where they are now. So to have that inconsistent desire and commitment is because the client has got through this defense. They have a defense mechanism that is going up. It means they are not ready to process their feelings. They're not ready to process their emotions. So it is now the therapist's job to navigate those, it's like a closed door. So they need to navigate this closed door and see, if there's a way that they would want to continue. Or is it something maybe the client needs to, say, okay, you know what, let's not focus on this right now. I need to focus on something else. And then together they focus on it. But then the therapist has to come back to, the regular, to the thing that was left off. They have to come back and address that particular emotion in order for the therapy to move forward. Because if the therapist lets go of whatever it is that caused the up and downs, then they're never going to process it. And you as a client will never find benefit from a therapy session. So it's absolutely necessary that even though you're going through your ups and downs, you let your therapist know, hey, you know what, this is what I felt last time. I want to take a break from sessions. We're talking about this particular thing, but can I talk about maybe something else that has been affecting me and maybe come back to this? That will help you process it. But again, you have to be open to facing those emotions and feelings, because that's how you will come off the wave of emotions that you're talking about. Now, what strategies could the patient use to reestablish their desire and commitment to therapy? Well, it is not your job to get that desire back. It is your therapist's job to navigate that for you. It is their job to figure out, what was it maybe that stopped you from, having go through this process? What was it that we can change in our therapy process so that you feel more safe again? Because remember, the key is to feel safe in the sessions. If you're not feeling safe in your sessions to talk about your emotions and whatever you went through, then the therapy process is not going to work again. It's not going to help you reestablish that connection and desire to help you commit to therapy. So try having, again, an open communication with your therapist and say, you know what, the strategies you're using on me are not working, and we need to figure something out, because what I'm going through is like an up and down of emotions and I can't handle it. So talk to your therapist. Now, sometimes in some of the sessions, I would ask the client, hey, do you want to take a break from your weekly sessions and kind of just, have a moment to yourself and understand what it was that was affecting you? Is it something that you need? And sometimes the clients would come back saying yes, because they needed that break. They needed that little bit of a break to come back and get the desire again. And here's the key: even if you're taking a break from sessions, the therapist still needs to be in touch with you via email, just to make sure that you are fine, that you are doing okay, even if the session seemed heavier or was like a very deep session where you didn't feel comfortable. So the therapist has to make sure that they are in constant communication with you, and that is one of the key qualities of a therapist. Well, that seems to be like my last question that I kind of had. And, this is again the first time that I did a session for a live session. So I'm really happy. I'm sorry if I found, if you all found me a little nervous, because again, like I said, it's my first time. And I hope you enjoyed the session. I look forward to, maybe seeing a question from you. If you are open to asking me a question, I want to make sure that all questions are going to be answered anonymously, which means I'm not going to reveal your name. It's going to be exactly like this format where only your question is going to be seen, and I will answer your questions and try my best to see if I can help you with those. Again, I just want to make sure that it's all coming from my professional experience. If you do need to go see a therapist, or this is an emergency situation, then please head to your nearest emergency hospital, talk to your therapist. But I do look forward to answering your questions as much as I can. And again, email them to me at megha@meghamathur.com. And I will see you here next week for my next session on Coffee with Megha. I hope you all had a great session and you enjoyed it, and I will see you next week. Again, I do apologize if I was nervous. This was my first time, and it was really fun answering these questions. If you are interested, I do have my profile on Quora where I answer questions on mental health, and it has generated over 400,000 views in the past 2 months. So I hope you feel confident enough to ask me your questions. I hope to see you here next week. Till then, live your best life. Bye, everyone.